I think it is about a gift that God's given us, that in every season we get to choose oneness. And there are profound benefits and there's profound beauty in that God, I believe, wanted to give us to bless our marriage, to bless our union, to allow us to be fruitful, not just in the procreative way, which obviously is miraculous, but in our everyday life together, allowing us to move through as one.
Hey there, you're listening to the Girls Talking Life podcast, and I'm your host, Johanna. If you're like me, you love time with friends. I always leave feeling encouraged, inspired to try something different, or I've learned something new. So why not continue to grow even when we can't be with our girlfriends? We're not made to do life on our own. So in each episode of this show, I'll bring you a girl and her story to give you refreshing ideas to stir your soul. Let's walk this road together. Are you ready to talk life? Hello, you are listening to episode number 129, and I am so glad you're here. You may have heard me talk about Girls Talking Life's 5th birthday giveaway a few weeks ago. Congratulations to our Grow Your Faith prize bundle winner, Alexis. And thank you so much for supporting the show and for helping me celebrate. Since the podcast is now 5 years old, there will be some small changes coming, but I promise to keep you in the know on what's going on. We are wrapping up the Strengthen Your Marriage series today. It has been so powerful. On episode 126, I talked to Allie Patterson about strengthening our marriages with a firm foundation. On episode 127, Heather Bier and I chatted about strengthening our marriages with honest communication. And on episode number 128, Stephanie Boersma joined me for a conversation on strengthening our marriages with forgiveness and healing. If you haven't listened to those, I encourage you to go back and catch them. My guests have given me so much to think about and pray about and apply to my marriage. I don't want to forget it. And maybe you feel the same way. So I have created a series reflection guide for both of us. It's a free download and a companion to the series. It highlights key points, it ties all 4 episodes together, and it gives you the chance to take what you heard, reflect on it, and apply it to your life. If you're a GTL newsletter subscriber, your series reflection guide will be delivered to your inbox today. If you're not a subscriber yet, find the link in the show notes to get your free guide. As the title of this episode suggests, we are talking about married intimacy today. While it is a beautiful conversation, it might not be one that you'd like to listen to with little ears nearby. For much of human history, intimacy has been a place of pain and brokenness, an area where we have lacked discipleship. So it was really important to me to include this topic in the Strengthen Your Marriage series. Francie Winslow is on the show, and she's letting us in on her healing journey when it comes to sex, marriage, and the mission of God. She invites us to heal, to find freedom, and to shift our mindsets to more accurately reflect the goodness that God intended for us. Francie's ministry includes sexual discipleship for women. She teaches not as an expert, but as a Christian woman pursuing healing and wholeness for herself, rooted in scripture and theology. You will hear us talk about correcting wrong beliefs about sexuality, God's design for intimacy, being vulnerable with our husbands, overcoming barriers, and connecting to your body. Everything Francie and I talk about can be found in the show notes on girlstalkinglife.com. Here is our conversation. Hello, Francie Winslow. Thank you so much for coming on Girls Talking Life.
Absolutely. What an honor. Thanks for having me.
We have some mutual friends, and so I've known about you for a long time. I've listened to some of your teachings, and I love your message, so I'm thrilled to have you. But I'm also a little nervous because we're talking about a sensitive issue today. At least it is for me. I know that you're used to talking about it.
Yeah.
So Francie, what is it that you teach and talk about with women?
Yeah, so it is the last topic that I would have chosen to talk about if you would have asked me what my ministry path would have been 25 years ago. But I've come to really embrace it and actually love it because I've seen God move so powerfully in my life and in others' lives in a way that I didn't even know I needed. And it has to do with sexual healing and integration. And that doesn't even mean like necessarily from some huge trauma. It's just we, since the beginning of time, have been so disconnected from our bodies and from the goodness of being male and female and from the gift of intimacy, that it has been a place of pain for much of human history, I would say. Every human is sexual. Every human is male and female. Every human has this calling and desire to walk in the ways that God made them in their bodies. And yet in the church, it's been a real silent place. And so we've lacked discipleship over generations, not just in recent years. And so that's been my heart, is kind of this space of discipleship as it relates to sexuality. Really starting in my own story. I don't come at this as like a professional. I come at it as a real Christian woman who has pursued healing and wholeness in my journey with the Lord for the last 20 or more years. And so it really is a ministry of overflow of my authentic, real journey in the Lord, rooted in scripture and theology, but also real life. So yeah, I have a Heaven in Your Home podcast is what it's called. And we talk about sex, marriage, and the mission of God.
That's one of the things I love so much about you, is your authenticity and willingness to share.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit more about your story. You said this came from your own story.
Yeah. Well, I love the Lord from a really young age. I wanted to give him everything. I found the more I loved him, the more I wanted to love him, the more he loved me. It was like this ongoing outpouring of his love in my heart since I was a really little girl. But there was this area of my life that it felt like was always in a battle, and it had to do with my body and my sexuality. And there were like lots of different things throughout my life that were kind of challenges. I think I was inappropriately exposed when I was little. And so I had this awakening and this struggle that nobody knew about as a little girl that felt like I was curious about my body. And we're just going to go there. Okay. We're going to be really honest, because I feel like we have to name things as Christian women to be free. Like we can't just talk in platitudes. So when I was little, I struggled with masturbation and then went through my high school. I never told anybody because I was a strong Christian girl. And I thought, if I have this, then my witness will be compromised, or, I can't confess this to anybody because I'll be disappointing to people. And so I had that kind of pressure-based religious mentality that kept me in real bondage. At the same time, I was also really wanting to give my life to God. And so I tried to give him everything, and I gave him my dating life, and I gave him, my promise for purity and all of that. And in the process, I even was working with a ministry for girls on sexual purity and really thinking about it from the point of giving everything to God. And so I was in a battle in my own journey, but I knew that God was working in me and wanting to reveal his love to me in a way that made me satisfied in him and not needing it from guys. And so it was that journey as a young girl. And then I met my husband when I was 19 and was really sold out for the Lord. At that point, was walking in freedom from my old patterns, but met my husband, and it was very clear that he was the one. And so we got married when I was 20. And what was challenging for me was to go from being a sold out young Christian woman of don't do it, meaning don't have sex, be abstinent. And okay, if I can just not do it, then I'm doing good. But then to get married and to say, well, now you can do it with really no vision, theology, healing journey, it was a huge jump for me. And I found that a lot of shame accompanied me into marriage. And it was just kind of this inherited belief that really sex is kind of dirty. And how do I get over that? Or sex is bad, or my body is bad, or my body is dangerous. All of these internalized beliefs that I had, but I never quite could name them. But they were living in my body. Like I could feel the shame. I could feel the desire to shut down or to be distant or to hide or to a lack of ability to connect with pleasure or a lack of ability to be confident in my body. And so those kinds of things were happening. And I realized that God was really wanting to heal my heart. And he was really wanting to heal me past a view of sex is a man's need. Because that was a lot of what the books I was reading were kind of insinuating, is that, okay, if I'm a good wife, now the next thing is not just don't do it, but now the thing is do it and meet his needs so he doesn't X, Y, and Z. And it was during our first year of marriage really that God did a deep healing, began a deep healing work in my heart and my husband's heart to see sex from a completely different lens, truly a healing lens and a healing experience that has continued on. It wasn't like one time I got healed and now I'm better. we're like very complex onions, and one layer at a time just keeps getting shed. And I keep realizing more and more the power and the goodness and the beauty of how God made me as a woman, as an image bearer, as the pinnacle of creation, one who is given deep capacity for pleasure and incredible gifts within her body and her sexuality. And it's like God has continued to heal me so that I can really find freedom as a woman that glorifies him, as a fully alive wife, that I'm not just meeting my husband's need and doing sex as a duty, but I'm really finding the beautiful garden design that God intended. And I say finding because I haven't fully found it yet. It is this healing journey that the more I walk with the Lord in intimacy, and the more my husband and I grow in intimacy, the more I realize that God has a continual unfolding of integration and healing. And a lot of it has come through our marriage and our sex life, because it kind of requires that level of vulnerability to grow. So that's a bit of how I got into it. Ministry wise, specifically, I was having a lot of healing. My husband was like, have you talked to your friends about their sex life? And I said, no. This was early in our marriage, like first year, second year. And I was like, I will never talk to my friends about that. That's so weird, so private, so awkward. And he just said, I don't think what God's doing in you is just for you. It might be for other people too. Talk to your friends. And so that began just casual conversations with girlfriends and led into speaking at some women's groups locally and then more nationally, and kind of got the opportunities to see that this is an area and a topic that women are really needing to have conversations around, really in a trusted way, in a safe way, in a way that talks about the ways of the heart and the body and how God designed it all to work together. And one speaking opportunity here and there didn't seem to be as fruitful as if I could just go into my closet, shut the door, and hit record and do a lot of episodes that could be like an ongoing conversation. And at the same time, my little people were really little and I wanted to be home. And so it just was a blessing to have the podcast as a place to be able to continue this message going forward, keep the message moving, and be at home and be a mom and live the message and not just talk about it. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Francie, that is an amazing story.
Mm-hmm.
I think that so many Christian women can relate to you feeling sexually broken, number one, and then wanting to live for the Lord and being like, don't do it, getting married and then do it and love it. And it's going to be great.
Right.
And I think we need to, and you do this so wonderfully, shift our mindset on all of that.
Yeah.
You talk about how deeply God cares about this part of our marriage. Why is it so important to him?
Yeah. Well, for one, I think it was his idea. It was his design. What is so surprising to me is that over the years, I kind of thought sex was just this separate area of life that was kind of taboo and I guess required for babies, but really awkward, and probably God's not very interested in it. It was just this thing of this faraway box that you only open when necessary was kind of the assumption that I had in the back of my mind. I don't really know why I thought that, but definitely not an integrated vision that incorporated a celebration from a biblical worldview. And so the more I leaned into the Lord on this and the more I let him do a healing work, he started leading me in my own journey, but also to more theologically based ways of seeing this. And in addition to theologically based ways of seeing this, scientifically. So I started seeing the design of God on my body. I started seeing how hormones work. I started seeing this was God's idea that when we have orgasm, oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin are released that helps a husband and wife bond and become one and feel close. What a good God that he did that it helps our sleep, that it helps us feel that emotional closeness, that it also rejuvenates our nervous system. Like it is such a powerful gift. Wow, what a good God. So I started seeing the science, and then the theology of it was really just mind blowing to me that in Matthew, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees and they cornered him and said, well, what about marriage and divorce? Shouldn't we be able to do that? And Jesus stopped them in his tracks and he just said, hey, in the beginning, it was not so. And that has been one of my entry points with the Lord over the last 10 or 15 years is in the beginning, God, what was your dream? In the beginning. And oftentimes I think we settle our viewpoint on many things in life, especially marriage and sexuality, on Genesis 3, the fall, sin, brokenness. And yes, that is right. But Jesus himself said, in the beginning, it was not so. And we're where we are because of our hardness of heart. So I felt the Lord inviting me to do a deep dive into Genesis 1. What is God's dream? What was God's intention? What was the enemy so terrified of? And why was he so bent on destroying it and dismantling it, isolating us and making us afraid and ashamed? Because the very thing he attacked was our bodies. He came against them through deception. And then the result of that was their isolation, lack of intimacy with God and one another, hiddenness, hiding their bodies behind fig leaves, shame. And that is the opposite of the intimacy that God ordained, which was nakedness and unashamedness. So they were naked and unashamed. They were one. And so I began to spend a lot of time in Genesis 1 and realized that it was not only God's gift, but it was actually for them in the garden. It was God's ideal and God's gift for filling the earth with his glory, that he took a man and a woman and marked them with his very image, their bodies, the masculine and the feminine, carry the nature and the image of God so that we could reflect God to the world. And part of that is in this invitation that he gave them in the first Great Commission from a place of oneness. He blessed them and said, be fruitful, multiply, and take dominion. And so my head just started spinning. I'm like, God, sex is a good gift. It's this call to be one, not just to meet a man's need. Oh my goodness, that is, I think, a lie from the pit of hell, honestly. It's not about a man's need. That's such a twisting and a perversion of it. It is a mutual blessing, a mutual gift for the sake of procreation, yes, for the sake of intimacy, for the sake of oneness, so that there can be an overflow of fruitfulness from our homes, from our bedrooms that flows out into our living room, out into our workplaces and our community. And so I got this idea and this vision. I called it the ripple effect of sex. And really it's the ripple effect of intimacy and oneness, that when we invite God into that very core intimate place and we say, God, reorder it, heal us, heal me. We want to do this from the design of God. We want to see you be a part of our sex life. We want you to heal us and make us whole and reorder this. There is this beautiful ripple effect where the intimacy we share is so powerful. It can affect our children, our careers, our churches, our communities, and ultimately the culture around us. And the same is true when our core place of intimacy is off base or full of wounding or disordered. Our children feel it, our communities feel it, our churches feel it, our workplace feels it, and our culture feels it. And we don't have to look far to see the disorganization, the disarray, the chaos that has come from a lack of God's truth in the most secret place. And I'll say this one more thing, because this might be a lot to process, but what I love even more is that as image bearers, it's like our bodies are a small picture of the greater reality, right? We bear his image as male and female. We are small pictures of who God really is. And marriage is the same way, that our intimacy in marriage is a small picture of our intimacy with God. And that was his design, that our oneness and our intimacy in marriage is similar to our oneness and intimacy with Jesus. He said, if you abide in me, if you're close to me, you will bear fruit. And so when I think about our sex life, there's so many ways that I think about it, but theologically, I just realized this was God's design. This was his beautiful dream. The enemy has come hard against it. Why? Because it is so profound and so mysterious and so beautiful and so linked to our call to take dominion on the earth as his image bearers. And so that inspires me to continue to stay open to God in my healing journey and to share it, because I believe it's under attack for a reason. And I believe that as we submit our hearts to God in this space and invite him in, the fruitfulness and the healing can be profound for us and literally rippling out through generations. The amount of older women that I've had reach out to me are like, Francie, no one talked to us about it. I'm 60 years old. I've been married for 30 years or more, and they are getting healed. So it's not just for like young women. It's for every person who longs to have a life that every room of your heart and every room of your home is open to God and his design.
We have said connection, sex, intimacy. Will you define it for me? What is intimacy in marriage?
Well, I think there's so many types of intimacy, right? There is a powerful connection. I'll say the powerful connection in my marriage, right? I can speak for me because I'm not a counselor giving counseling advice to anyone. But what I've noticed has led to the most intimate space between us it's not just sex as an activity. It is being known. and being vulnerable. And that includes emotional, and that includes spiritual, and it includes physical. It even includes intellectual. And so when all of those places are growing, our sex life is awesome because we're bringing our whole selves to each other, our minds, our bodies, our spirits, our curiosities, our places of pain. And so I think that's what God designed when he called us to be one with him. Like Jesus talks about being one with him as he's one with the Father. And as he calls a husband and wife to be one, is this place of not having fig leaves, of not hiding behind things. And it always requires, as we have this conversation, for us to realize that we are where we are because of our story. And so it's a tricky thing just to lay out this big vision. But what we have to realize, because it can feel hard, it can feel prickly, like there's places this doesn't work for me, or my husband can't go there, or whatever. And I think that's my prayer for me and for listeners. And ultimately, we can't make this happen because I think it's part of life makes this happen for us, but that we would be healed in our story, what's happened to us, what we've been through, how we were formed in our family, our upbringing, and what we brought into our marriage, and what we just say, this is who I am, but we are who we are for a reason. And God is a God of healing who can heal places of the past and send us into the future in a more integrated, healed place. And so, yeah, I think intimacy is that deep place of vulnerability. And to be honest, like I think we had amazing growing sex for a long time, amazing growing emotional connection for a long time. But it was a season of real brokenness over the last 7 years that has brought us even deeper intimacy on a soul level where we've shared deep weakness together and deep brokenness. And so I think I love to say, like, we're always growing and we're always healing because we never fully arrive. And I think the goodness of God sees to it that he will meet us when we call out to him, and it's his timing of how we get there. But I think that would be intimacy to me, is that place of just living with no fig leaves and before God primarily, because he's the one who's doing this healing work, and then seeking to walk that out with our spouse in a way that's genuine.
A few weeks ago, I talked to a woman who mentioned that shame binds us, and that when you speak something out loud to another person 3 times, that does something psychologically to you to unlock some of that shame, maybe all of that shame. And so I noticed just sharing some things with my husband has really unlocked a door of intimacy that we didn't have before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it can be something small. Like if that feels overwhelming, like, oh, I can't go there. It's something as small as like, hey, this is a place of my body that I'm really insecure about. And I worry about it every time I get undressed. And we've rehearsed this even just, and it sounds a little silly, but you can even say, hey, babe, I need to hear you say this to me because I'm really scared that you're not going to like this part of me. So if you could tell me that you think my blank is beautiful, like it gets really vulnerable, but those are some of the healing moments that have happened when you talk about things, maybe emotionally or maybe about your sex life that feel like places you'd rather hide, and you open those up, especially obviously this is in a trusting relationship that's honoring. If you're in a relationship that is not in a healthy place, you don't feel safe, that might be for later. But if you're in a marriage that feels solid and safe right now, that's a profound step of vulnerability. And we've experienced that even just recently. Hey, I have a razor burn all over my legs right now, and I feel really insecure, like I have acne all over my legs. Will you still love me right now? And then he gets to like go overboard and love me. And I feel like I wanted to hide, but now I can share my body. Just it could be little things, or the big things really have been a place of deep healing to be able to share and break off that shame. And you're right, the saying something 3 times, that I don't know about that specific number, but it is the power of being known. And that's what our souls were made for. In that place of being known, shame falls away.
I feel like you could be on this journey to more intimacy, and then there are still all these barriers. I was thinking about our conversation today, and I just started listing things that could be potential barriers, like your time and energy. We talked a little bit about body image, children, little kids needing your constant attention, and then older kids who stay up later than you do at night.
Yeah.
Lack of desire, wounds that we need to heal. We've discussed a little bit. What are the most common barriers that you hear about, Francie?
Yeah. I mean, I think you named a lot of them right there. I think that those are all very real and very common. I think underlying a lot of them is, and we may not even be able to say it out loud, but a mindset that needs to be healed about sex. And that's a beautiful miracle that God does when he renews our mind and he gives us kind of a new way of seeing things through a garden lens where we begin to see things. And then some of those barriers are able to kind of become less of a barrier because our vision is clearer and we have more motivation to get creative. And so I think the time, the exhaustion, I talk about the W's, the wounds from our past, whispers from women around us, like our auntie figures, women in the church who never really celebrated the gift of sex. So we've inherited this kind of like critical or fearful nature about it. Weariness, which is exhaustion. We talked about that. The world, obviously, informing us on, well, this is what sexy means, or if I'm going to be hot in bed, I have to be or act like this, or it just kind of becomes this narrative in our head that I don't think is really authentic. Yeah, so those are, I think you named them, but the weariness is for sure real. We have 6 kids. I'm not sure what season of life you're in, but we have 6 kids ranging from age 15 down to 5. We have had seasons where Wyatt has traveled. We've had seasons where he's worked through the night on a night shift, all sorts of seasons and situations. And I will say, like, the Lord is so good to give creative ideas for connection, and it is possible. And we've had some pretty extreme health crises in our family, and God has continued to provide really powerful places of connection for our marriage and our sex life that have been surprising. And I will say, though, throughout every hard season we've been in, prioritizing our intimacy has been number one when it comes to our day planner. And we have benefited so much because when we prioritize our intimacy, the other things are easier to navigate. And it's so easy to get that ship upside down because we don't have enough time and we're too tired and the kids are never, so all those things can become barriers. But I will say, like, we decided early on when we had 2 little kids, 16 months apart, our first 2, we were living in a new city. I was in grad school. He was traveling. It was insane. We just passed babies back and forth. And it felt like that was all we did, and high-fived each other. And we looked at each other and thought, that is not who we want to be. And so that year we decided every night because we didn't have any money for a babysitter. We didn't know any babysitters. We're just in that kind of crunch season. We decided every night from 8 to 9 would be our date night instead of waiting for a date night to come that never came. And so that was about 13 years ago. And for about 10 years, we did that every night from 8 to 9. And it was mommy daddy time. And that helped our marriage not only survive the craziness, but we grew so much from prioritizing that and just making, it's kind of like you have that jar of all your stones. That was, obviously walking with God is our biggest stone, but our marriage and our intimacy is our next biggest stone, and the other things fit in. And I will say we haven't done it perfectly, but the other things have benefited because of that prioritizing. And you can listen to my podcast for the hotel date ideas, because that has been another huge game changer for us in this kind of hectic, stressful season that we've been in.
I heard you tell a story where you and your husband were disconnected, I think is what you called it. Yeah. I would call it probably you were fighting.
Disconnected, yeah.
Disconnected. And what you chose to do was to have more sex. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah. I mean, again, this is qualified with, like, we were in a good place. We were just tired. He was busy. He was low. He's in sales. It's like a lot of pressure, to provide for a family. I was feeling lonely at home, feeling like I wasn't getting enough emotional care and connection. And so in that place, it's so easy for me to say, well, until my emotional needs get met, until you sit and talk to me, I'm not going to have sex with you because my needs are not being met, or I feel disconnected. I feel far from you. And so it was a bit of a flip. I felt like the Lord just said, Francie, instead of being offended, will you present kind of an offering, like an invitation? And instead of buying into offense, will you step into offering openness? And so I invited him upstairs that night in particular, that I was kind of sad and down and shut down. And we connected and we enjoyed sexual intimacy. And it was like his heart burst open with words and with tenderness. And in that moment, I was watching him, like, he had no words 30 minutes ago. And now I can't shut him up. And I thought there's something to this. And I think what I know now is there is a hormonal component, and there is a sense also, what I've learned about the masculine soul is that the masculine soul is unique in beautiful ways. And one of the ways that I have found that it is unique is that the masculine soul needs to know that they are cared for, that they're enough, and that sex is directly connected to our souls. It's not just a bodily activity. And so sexual intimacy is a place where we can communicate that to each other, that you are what I want, in a way that you can't communicate that to anyone else. Like, you can have prayer partners, and you can have small group, and you can have Bible study friends, and, go on double dates with people and have all sorts of other places of connection and interaction. But this is the only thing reserved for each other. And this is the only place where you fully get naked and open up in this way. And so I realized that for my husband, at least, it was deeply ministering to his masculine soul for me to initiate and for me to make space in my evening for him. And then it was like the emotional connection I had been wanting started flowing. And so it really turned things upside down in my worldview, thinking I needed to get what I need first, and then we'll have sex. Like, when all the lights are just right and when the music is playing just right, then it'll be the right mood. And so we don't wait for the right mood anymore. Like, we have realized the power, and I just call it leaning in. That it's like when I'm most tempted to lean out and shut down and kind of roll back over, the gesture of even opening my body up and rolling back towards him or turning back towards him and him with me, we have a commitment to lean back in. And when we do that and we have sex, even when we don't feel like it, we don't wait for like this overwhelming libido to overtake us. We choose it and prioritize it because of how powerful of a gift it is. And so I think that was another huge shift, is realizing it's not actually about like this libido match. I think that is a bunch of baloney, to be honest. I think it is about a gift that God's given us, that in every season we get to choose oneness. And there are profound benefits and there's profound beauty in that God, I believe, wanted to give us to bless our marriage, to bless our union, to allow us to be fruitful, not just in the procreative way, which obviously is miraculous, but in our everyday life together, allowing us to move through as one.
Francie, I think you just blew the mind of a listener or two with that completely different, upside down shift in thinking.
Yeah, it was a different thought for me also, but I think after we've been married 19 years, and it has proven true and I'm just so glad. I think at this stage in my life, I'm so glad I didn't wait for all the right moments and all the right feelings. And him too. It's not just a one-sided thing. It's he chooses to lean in. And when we get our feelings hurt, little things like, hey, let's have this conversation with no clothes on because it's a lot. It is very vulnerable, but it is the quick way to reconnect and not have these walls up that last weeks, but to say, hey, we're going to fight for this. We're going to learn to fight for each other and not against each other, because this is a gift from God. And every day together is a gift, and we're to be on each other's team and we're to be one together.
That is so beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Francie, I'm going to switch gears just a bit.
Okay.
I would love to know what things you are loving right now. What are your 5 favorites?
Okay. So I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget them. But number 1 is a green mask by a group named Teami, Teami. It's all natural. And it's one of those things I do when I take a bath and I just want to pamper myself. It's like detoxifying. It's amazing. Teami. The other product that I'm loving is called Thrive Mascara.
Oh,
Have you heard of it?
I use that too.
It's really popular, but I really love it because I think I don't have time for fake eyelashes. I don't even know how to do that, but it lets me feel like I've got really solid mascara that's not going anywhere. The third thing I love is Amazing Grass green drink powder. I've been using it for years. I don't get paid by them. I should. But I drink it. I felt my body changing after my last baby, where I couldn't drink my coffee anymore, which was so sad. I felt like I needed a funeral or something because I had like a deep bond with my coffee, but my body just wasn't having it. And so I replaced it with Amazing Grass Energy. And I like the watermelon flavor. And that goes with me everywhere I go in the morning and midday. The other thing that I'm loving that's a little different is Club Pilates. I'm in my late 30s, almost 40, and I realized my normal workouts were too much for my body. And it might just be me showing my cards. We've just been in a really hard season of life for the last 7 years. And I realized I was too tired for my regular workouts. But I like to do it with people, and I like to go to a gym. So I joined Club Pilates and I really love it. So that's been fun. And then the last one is a store. It's Sierra. Have you ever heard of Sierra?
No.
It is like a Home Goods, except it's for athletic and outdoors stuff. And I have a Boy Scout and I've got a bunch of athletic kids, and anytime I can get like sales, I love it. So Sierra just came to our town, and I have a very hard time walking out of there without like way too much stuff because it's all on sale. And that has been a fun place for our family to kind of find some major bargains. So those are some of the things I'm loving.
Those are terrific. Thank you for sharing them with us.
Absolutely.
Francie, this conversation has been so, so good. I really think that you are doing great work for God's kingdom. And so many of us need to hear this. So many women need to know how wonderful this gift is that God has given them. And I pray that we can all have a shift in mindset when it comes to intimacy. I would love to know what your final word of encouragement is for women who want more connection, more intimacy with their husbands.
One thing we didn't quite get enough time to talk about, and I'll just end with this, is the power of God healing your relationship with your own body and your own femininity. And I dive a lot into that on my podcast because it was my journey of I'm good at doing, giving, serving, but so disconnected from desire and the gift of being female, which by nature is that we were made in the image of God, beautiful and full of sensuous beauty and receptivity. And our pleasure capacity is like 10 times that of a man's. And that was God's good gift to a woman. And I think even as Christian women, we'll like blush at that, but that is not only a beautiful gift, it's necessary for our thriving because of how much tension we hold in our bodies, how much anxiety we carry, how much we're doing for everybody. And that sex is not just a thing we do for our husbands or a thing we do for the sake of our marriage. It was a gift for our own body and for our own experience of what it is to be female. And that is a place that I think I would start with women, is not like, okay, how am I going to fix my marriage now? But is how is the Lord inviting me to see my body as beautiful, my whole body. And that in and of itself can be a couple years worth of inner healing. I pray for you. It's like super fast, but for me, it's been years and I still find layers. And the other deal is that I want to be able to pass that healing to my daughters because we can't give away what we don't have. And many, many, many women come to me, well, how can I teach my kids about sex? Or how can I teach my daughters better? And I say, start with your own heart. Start with your own heart before the Lord. And if anything feels icky or overwhelming or pushes your insecurity buttons, that is the place to begin with the Lord and say, okay, Lord, I'm starting to get a little fast heart rate. I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. I'm starting to feel a little shut down or overwhelmed. That is just your invitation to bring that to the Lord because He's your maker. He's the one who designed you and He's your healer. And I think as we walk more alive as women, fully alive as image bearers, our place in our marriage becomes more joyful, and we have an overflow to give to the daughters who are following us, whether they're biological daughters or spiritual daughters. And I believe that the grip of the enemy will greatly be reduced as we ourselves walk in more freedom and healing that Jesus paid for us to receive, that we don't have to walk in shame and disconnection, but we can be fully present to the beauty of God in us and expressed through us. So that's my invitation, is just to take one step closer to the Lord and say, God, what do you have to say to me about this? And I do have some series on my podcast about blessing your body and your wonderful female body. And those are places that have been profound, as well as embracing the gift of pleasure. So I think those are my prayers and my thoughts to close today.
That is an amazing final word. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening. Didn't Francie just blow you away? Her wisdom and encouragement in this area is such a gift. What was the most eye-opening thing for you? Is there something small that you can share or that you can do to start growing in this intimacy with your husband? I love how she said when we ask God to renew our minds and we're able to see intimacy through that garden lens, the barriers become less difficult and we have the motivation to prioritize connection and to get creative. If you would like to hear more from Francie, all the ways to connect with her, her podcast, and her website with lots of amazing resources can be found in the show notes for today's episode. And be sure to grab the series reflection guide. Tie all 4 episodes together, reflect, and pull out what you can apply to your life. If you enjoyed this episode and have loved this series, let me know by leaving a 5-star rating or writing a short review on Apple Podcasts. Friend, don't let your conversation stop when the show is over. Share your story and start your own conversations with the girls in your life. I will see you back here in 2 weeks. Thanks for tuning in.